Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Williams. My next guest is a professional race car driver based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and the owner of LYFE Motorsports. With a background as a factory-trained Porsche mechanic and racing instructor, his interests in cars began in his teens and has grown into an impressive career. He and his team created the Sierra car, which now pushes motorsports feats to a whole new level, and I'm excited to learn more about his story. Welcome, Corey Powelson.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on here, man. I really appreciate, the last few seasons, I guess, being able to talk to way more people in motorsports and expose a lot more folks to the industry. And so let's start here with just if you can tell our listeners a little bit about you and kind of what you do in your current role.
So I came into motorsport with no money, which is a terrible way to come into motorsport because it takes a lot of money. So I knew at a young age, I just enjoyed it through video games and movies and what have you. I just knew I had to be involved with cars. And of course I wanted to be a race car driver, but I didn't know how to get there. And so I had to get into the industry. You've got to serve some purpose. And so I became a mechanic and started working on cars in my parents' driveway and decided to make a career out of it. At 16 years old, I said, this is what I'm going to do, and committed to it. And at 19 years old, I got accepted to Porsche factory training in Atlanta. And so, moved down there, did the Porsche schooling, and still didn't know how I was going to drive race cars, but continued my mechanical career. I bought a go-kart. I started taking my own car to the track and just kind of self-taught a lot of the racing side of things while continuing to work on the wrenching and building race car side of things. And fast forward, 20 years from idea to now, I've got a pretty cool set of experiences behind me, deals I never thought I'd be a part of, races I'd never thought I'd partake in. And just from a mechanic's standpoint, I didn't know another way to get into racing, experience those things, but I've been able to do it. And it's just been an odd career trajectory, if you will.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe an odd career trajectory, but I feel like there's something there. Just because I just wrote a note here that says kind of wanted to get into the industry, but didn't know exactly how to do it. And so you found a place where you could kind of get involved, be of service. And so starting as a mechanic maybe is not the traditional trajectory for some folks who get into race car driving, but you found a spot.
I needed to make a living, man. I needed to get out of the parents' house. I needed to build race cars. I needed money. And I thought, I want to do cars for the rest of my life. That was already a given. So I might as well learn how to work on them and learn a bit about them, for my future hobby. And I can tell you that my career as a mechanic would have not continued this path if I didn't find my way into motorsport, into my way into racing, and then into the driver's seat. To sit stagnant at a mechanic position was never my goal. I knew I could make a career at a dealership. There's plenty of well-paid guys there, but I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to drive exotic race cars. I was a young man, I still am in a sense. So I'm 36 now. From the past 20 years, from 16 to now, has all just been, let's go play with cars and see how long I can keep doing this and not get bored or, just stop progressing, I guess. And that's a fear of mine. It's especially with it being like a hobby or a passion sport. It's always about the next race, the next cool part, going faster and faster and faster. It never stops.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the behind the seat behind the wheel of the vehicle, because to me that seems like one of the most intense, exhilarating experience I can imagine. But I think about other industries. So let's say somebody wants to get into the restaurant industry, or maybe they want to get into acting or I don't know, business. and entrepreneurship. But they just don't know an access point. I don't know. I've just kind of odd question, but was it at age 16, were you thinking, beyond like making money and paying the bills, like this is my entry point? I just needed to get a foot in the door, or yeah. Tell me a little bit about can you remember what your thought process was?
Oh yeah, there was an aha moment as because I started originally as a bicycle mechanic because I liked racing bicycles, and it was BMX bikes, and my first job outside of my parents' bar was it was a bicycle shop, and so I was putting together bikes there, and bikes turned into cars. I went to some street races. It is illegal and very dangerous, and
yep,
it's a way to do things. But a long time ago, I went to some street races with some friends, and I saw a Honda Civic beat a Dodge Viper, and this is in like '98. So it was pretty early for Hondas to be going fast. It was kind of mind blowing. And, a little bit after that, I was already playing video games. A little bit after that, the movie Fast and Furious came out. And so I think I was barely 16 at that point. But that living the car culture and like being able to make a living at it as well, like it wrapped me up, man. Because it was video games, it was nightlife, it was entertainment, it was like passion, it was exhilarating, it's competition. It was an entire lifestyle that I was like, yeah, this is me. This is what I want to be doing. And so I knew the racing part was the best out of all the parts. Like, I don't love being a mechanic. I don't torque head bolts and be like, man, that is satisfying. It's like, I got to be driving the car to really get the most enjoyment out of it. And so ultimately that was always the goal, is, get behind the wheel of a car as often as possible. That's the place that I feel best, but it's also the hardest, most expensive place to keep yourself.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. What a moment to see that Honda beat a Dodge Viper. You right? Is that what it was?
Yeah. And you know what? I've never been a Honda guy, and I've never been like a Viper guy. But that moment was just paired with a bunch of other pivotal moments in my life that I was into Japanese cars at that point. I saw the power of the Japanese import and the turbos. Like, there was a whole era that came upon us that I got to witness, and really partake in. And just culturally, it goes really, really deep. And I've met a lot of wonderful people. And just playing with cars, it's such a dumb thing to say, in such a complex, beautiful world. I'm playing with cars, but for me, it's like it's a lifestyle, it's an art form. It's something I enjoy with my family, and it's an odd hobby, if you will.
I'm just so impressed, Bill Cole. I think it's actually a super cool thing that you fell in love with. And I can imagine as soon as you got obsessed with it, it was everywhere, right? Like, your vision is almost, you're wearing lenses where you're picking up on motorsports and figuring out the next thing to get into and how to get invested and involved. And especially with the expansion of, I guess you mentioned turbo cars and Japanese automotives. I think that would be super, super exciting. I'll be honest with you though. It's no more or less important than any other obsession or passion that people get into to me. Right. Like I some people are really into writing literature, or some people are really into, I don't know, podcasting or comedy, and they get obsessed with it. And what impresses me about you is, because you started recognizing this thing at a very young age, you found an entry point and you continue to obsess about it. And to me, it speaks to why you're successful, and you've continued to be exposed to so many events. You've been able to travel the world. I mean, we just talked, offline about a couple of trips in Australia and all the people you've been able to know because of this passion, this interest. I just think that more people need to. I think it'd be a great world if people could find passion like an interest the way you found it.
Yeah, I don't know how I would live any other way, and that's I have 2 young kids, and as a parent, I just want to let them know that they can go out and do rad stuff. Like, the options there, you can go and get it, and there's never a clear path to get there. But, if you keep working at it and find what makes you happy, then, that's the number one most important thing I think you can do with your time. And as a parent, I'm trying to instill that. My parents they didn't have a lot of money, but they gave me a lot of support. They told me to go, try new things. And I've always said, if the second it's not fun, I'm going to leave it. I've just had such an amazing time in this sport and on this journey. Like, I've been having fun the whole time. Sure, there's been challenges, like monumental challenges, but I'm having fun, and it's pretty amazing. And so when it's not fun, I'll just go take up fishing or, fun hobby, I suppose. But it's really, really fun right now. So
very cool.
We keep going.
So you also mentioned about being a mechanic. It's not like that's the part where you're passionate, right? That's not the part where you're in love. And but again, just to go back of an entry point, I'm kind of curious about your perspective on the parts of the job. Not every part of a job or an industry is going to be exciting to any individual. I just love to give your take on kind of how do you endure those other areas that may be mundane or necessary, but not necessarily exciting. Enduring those in order to enjoy the good stuff.
Dude, I endure so much crap all the time. It's miserable, and I'm awful at it. Now, I wasn't cut out to do any of this stuff, man. I'm like not very good at running a business. I'm not very good at building cars. I'm like not very good at a lot of the things that like come with running a motorsport business. But I keep trying each day, and progression's big for me. I always want to just improve and learn from my mistakes. And but I'm not good at I'm not good at anything. Like, maybe just driving, that's the thing I care the most about. But I've just such a hard time running aspects of the business that I don't care about because I'm not fully invested. Like, I've had an accountant that does my taxes and payroll since day one, pretty much. Yes. First day I had somebody, I'm like, I will ruin this because I care nothing about it. So please come help me. And yeah, Julie's my girl on that. She's taken care of me since day one. And my taxes are always right. The payroll's always on time. Like, it's just one of those things that I knew I hated it. But it's so critical to survive. Like, I just had to be real with myself about what tasks I'm willing to take on and what I'll do properly, even though I may suck at it at first, and what I just absolutely have to delegate out and pay somebody to do for me. And so I've gotten better over time of figuring out what I want to be spending my time on personally, and that's the things that I enjoy the most because that's what I'm going to be a rock star at. And otherwise, the things that I don't want to be doing just evaporate. They don't get done, and some of these things must get done. And so, yeah, that's been part of the biggest challenges because I'm not good at those things, and I don't make enough money. I'm not into like a super wealthy business where it's like, oh, I'll just make more money and hire the right people. It's like, oh, I have to suffer through tasks that I suck at. It's like, it's just punishment, but I can't afford to pay somebody else to do this thing, or it just has to be me to do that thing. So that's been miserable, man. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
This is a feel good podcast. You can tell by the title. I think when you're saying that, I think about like really strong leadership, because, the resources aren't there to have a whole team of people to do all the mundane, boring tasks that you're really quite not interested in, but you're willing to step in and do them when you have to, because you've identified that they have to get done. But the accounting piece that you gave an example of, that to me is the perfect one, which is like, this is when it's a critical task. This is important for my business, and I'm definitely not the person to do that. And so who can I find who can, like Julie, who can really take this on, give it the attention, and also too, maybe Julie's brain just works better in that direction, right? Or she just might be like a person who's just smart in that way.
She's dialed, man, and she just looks at me sometimes, and rightfully so. I don't have a good answer, Julie. You just help me, just simple stuff like that. But I knew that was too critical to having there's such a lack of stability in motorsport. These shops come and go, and teams come and go because one individual is funding the whole team, and then they decide they don't want to race one day. And I needed stability because I wanted a great team around me. And so covering your taxes right, covering your payroll right, having all of that, the due diligence on the backside done for each individual, super important. And I just knew I couldn't screw that up. And I wanted to stay in this business for a while. It wasn't just like, I'm going to overnight shop this thing. It was thought out and years in the making before I, opened the shop itself. So I just needed that. And I knew it was like no questions asked. This has to be like one of the first pieces of the puzzle. Like I basically had Julie lined up before I had the building, lined up. So yeah, I knew it was that important to the long-term success of the business, because you only mess around with taxes and stuff. They're so long, and like shortcutting payrolls and stuff like that. And those places don't last. And so that was a key point. And I've always had insurance and, done all that stuff by the book, but it's like pulling teeth. I want to cry on insurance renewal day every year. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like, again, another key characteristic of leadership is kind of the bigger vision and knowing the landscape of your industry with shops coming and going and teams, showing up and leaving, and wanting to, you saw a future where it was sustainable and long-term, which means that you put together key positions in place in order to make that happen. And again, I think our former executive with Enterprise say the fastest way to slow things down is to do it all yourself. I mean, we're just not built to do every part of the job. And so when you have key people who can step in and who actually have an interest in that, I mean, like I gave the example, like I don't like doing puzzles. It's just not my thing. I know people who can spend a lot of time with that level of focus and attention. I just would get frustrated. But that mindset has to be good from a team perspective regardless. And so because of somebody who has that kind of mindset is maybe he's better on data tracking or whatever else, or again, accounting and taxes, I'd rather have that person do the job than someone like me or like you who's, in your case, obviously an athlete, a creative, a visionary. And so it's good to be humble and to step aside and say, I got the right person to do the right piece. So I think you're doing it right, man. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective. You mentioned your folks weren't wealthy, but they, provided, and I'd love to know a little bit more about your background. If you can share with the listeners a little bit more about kind of where you grew up and, whatever else you'd like to share about your upbringing.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Small town outside of Salt Lake City. At the time, Salt Lake was roughly 2 million people in within an hour every direction kind of thing. It's not much around other than that. And we had a small farm. My dad worked on the road full time. He was not like a live-at-home dad. He always traveled across the country working. My mom was a bartender as I was a kid, and she became a bar manager and worked up into some ownership in a bar and continued. She worked in that industry for about 32 years. So full career out of it. And so I grew up around a party scene, but we also lived in the country. So we had a little farm, and but we were close enough to like a large city with an international airport. So I saw a pretty broad perspective of things growing up, and it's a pretty open household. We talked about everything together, and shared our worldviews, and it wasn't overly strict, but it was, there was some set rules that you didn't cross over, and then there was no problems, but I also had a ton of freedom to go and explore the world. And that's why I started on bikes. I had a bike and I rode everywhere as a kid. And, looking back as a parent, there's no way I would let my kid just take off on a bike at that young of an age. But my mom was like, yeah, let it roll. And my dad wasn't there to say no. And he was always supportive, but he was always not present. So with my mom's weird schedule and me having a lot of freedom, I just couldn't wait to explore stuff. So I went as far as my bike would take me all the time. And that's, I think, where the sense of adventure and the man and machine, the basis of my race car driver lifestyle has brought me, because I absolutely love to travel. I never miss an opportunity for a window seat, and I just stay out the entire time. And race cars is literally fun for me to fly around the entire world and see all sorts of cool things. So I think that sense of adventure I got in my childhood just came from the bicycle, and supportive parents that were there enough to like, hey, you should like go see things and do things. But I saw a lot of negative stuff too that comes along with the bar lifestyle, the party lifestyle. And my parents always stayed together, even though they lived apart. They, were married, or they still are married to this day. I dropped my mom off at the airport today, in fact. So, they're still together and made it through the whole thing, even though they never really lived together. So growing up around, the party people and that lifestyle that comes along with it, there was, a lot to unpack there, but it was kind of a clear vision of a lifestyle I didn't want to get into. I'll socially drink, and I don't have a problem with it, but and I like to party too. But I always knew like I was never going to be an alcoholic. I was never going to get into drug use. It just I watched it wipe out people from a young age, and I kept thinking like, why do people keep going back and doing this? Like everybody says that this happens, but just certain personalities are susceptible to that stuff. And so, I saw a lot of examples of what I didn't want to be. But there wasn't a lot of examples of wealthy people, successful people. I see it now in my customer base, just the way that their personality type, the way they operate within their family, in their neighborhoods. It's totally different. And I wasn't exposed to that until my mom made the effort to get me into a better elementary school. So she changed some numbers around, and I had a new address, and I was in the wealthy kid school. And so in elementary school, my mom took me out of one school and put me in a different elementary school. And I got to see how the other half lives. And I started to see the nice cars, the nice homes, the pools. It was really eye-opening. And, this person's an attorney, and this person, is an architect. They had all these different career paths that I was like, wow, I want these things in my life. Let's do that. That seems way better. So paying attention to how other people gain their wealth and their level of happiness and the level of time that they're around their family. I remember very vividly the attorney that was never there, had nice cars, nice home, nice family. Dude was never around. Man, he has one of the coolest cars that had just come out. I won't give too much information, but he never drove the car. It just sat there parked. He never went on the family vacations. I remember he didn't even have time to do that. And so I knew that was not going to be a way I was going to live my life, even though there was a certain level of success or money behind it. So anyway, my mom wanted me to see the other half, how people were doing it, how they were successful. And she just wanted me to be successful and happy. And she was very hands-off approach. I went to the public schools and I did the activities that I was interested in. And she'd cheer me on at the BMX race or come to the football game when I was a kid. And she was totally positive and around for that sort of stuff. And I think helped me really navigate myself into the world. I moved out of state at 18, so I was out. She did the same thing. She moved to Hawaii when she was 18. So she wasn't messing around. She was prepping me and getting me out the door, and that's what happened.
I mean, it sounds like both of your parents in their own ways were supportive of you, but your mom just seems to have a real distinct wisdom, and that she's passed down to you and has influenced you, and whether it was just exposure to the other lifestyles. Because I think sometimes, when you grow up with not all the means that everybody else has, it's easy to assume that everybody else has it better. Their lives are easier. But gosh, your story about the nice car with the attorney and the lack of family vacations, Like, I always wonder, like, what's the point of making all that money if you're miserable or you're not happy, you're not being with the people you love?
Yeah, no, it didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, yeah, there's a wisdom there, and it also probably influences the way you, as an adult, how you carry yourself with your family and your livelihood, and how you engage with all the things around you as well.
It feels that way, but I joke like my mom. I've got that personality, but I'm much more strict. I
Yeah,
just, even though I thrived under that, like
yeah,
under that leadership, I'm not that. I'm a little more hard nosed on a bunch of stuff, and I'm just like, oh, maybe I need to relax a little bit. But I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out. It's a good blend between my wife and I. So
yeah.
we both keep it cool.
Yeah, I think we're all making it up as we go along, especially when it comes to parenting. And I can imagine, growing up at the times that you grew up and when I grew up, parents could go to work all day and their kids could run the streets. But then, the world's a lot different now, and I think we know better. And
Yeah.
so, and there's a lot of access into our homes that we didn't have growing up without the internet and all that other stuff. So I think, I think we adjust along the way, and um, but so yeah, so I can appreciate maybe a 2.0 version, just
Yeah,
in some
I'm
ways.
feeling all right. They've got a good childhood, I think, so
Good.
far. So we're having fun.
Very cool. Very good. So one more question before we get into the big one. What is it like being behind the wheel of a car going that fast? I can't, I mean, it's exciting for me if I get to 90 on the highway and I'm like, okay, I need to slow down straight away, no curves. I'm just kind of curious about what the life is of being a race car driver.
It's unbelievable, man. It's the greatest thing in the world. Like I've been able to experience a lot of really, really cool things in my life, and there's something about the dancing with the race car, like being one with it, and everything's working, and it's such a complex machine, and there's a certain art to the way that it looks, and definitely to the way that it functions. So being able to pilot this masterpiece around a circuit at the very limit of adhesion, and just dancing with it is indescribable. You really have to experience it. And there's so many different versions of it, from, the Miata on the streetcar cruising up your local canyon. That's a great visceral experience. But there's ways to level up in the speed of the car and the amount of the downforce and how big the tires are and the circuit that you're on. Are you under lights? Is there a big crowd? There's so many levels to the drive that it's just the high you keep chasing. It's awful. I can't shake it, man. It's so superb in so many ways that my favorite other thing is snowboarding, and you just have a quiet, calm mountain and you're cutting fresh powder. I'm a Utah guy, so I love spending time in the mountains, and that couldn't be more opposite than race cars, except you're turning corners because it's so quiet, so serene, like separated and very individual. You're just on one plank, versus a mechanical race car that's burning fuel and has hot brakes, and there's all these hydraulic systems working. It's, I think there's beauty in the complexity of it all, of everything that's happening all in that moment. Where the snowboarding side, my other favorite feeling in the world is more of like a meditative state. But it's, when you drive, it just consumes you 100%. There's nothing, you can't focus on anything else in the world. And so much of it's feel. You have a feel for the brake pedal, a feel for the amount of steering at hand, a feel for the direction of wind. And if you have a big crosswind, you feel that stuff through the steering wheel, and through your seat, through the pedals. So it's it looks so violent from the outside, but it's really a very delicate ballet happening, and all the fire and the noise and the sounds, that's just kind of happening along with it. But it's unmatched, man. And I hope I haven't reached my absolute peak of driving. But something simple as a new setting, a new track, running under the lights, just can totally transform the feeling and improve it. So you keep chasing that. You go to new tracks, you drive new cars. It's always good, but you wonder if it's as good as it gets.
Yeah. You have a great way with words, and for somebody who's never done what you've done, I still can get why that thing would be attractive and addicting. I mean, it's just, this thing that seems violent and loud and dangerous is really a ballet, right? It's really this delicate ballet, this really complex machine, perfectly designed to do a particular thing, and depending on the wheels or the structure, or I'm sure other modifications could impact its performance, and then how you still have to work with the feel of it, right? So it's like the structured and intuitive, the loud and noisy and artistic. I just think it's like sublime. I think that's the definition of sublime. It's like this mix of things that maybe seem counter, something that's extremely frightening and beautiful at the same time. I just think you captured it really, really well. Yeah, they should clip that if they want to sell us for it. All right, we're going to take just a brief pause, and then we'll get into the big question.
Cool.
All right, so for our listeners, if this is your first episode or 41st episode, at the Best Worst Thing podcast, we like to ask guests to share a story, whether it's personal or professional, about a setback. And so there's three parts to the request or the question. So what's a story that was challenging to you, personal or professional? And it could be even overlap of both. How did you get through it? And then what did you learn, the takeaways that you want listeners to kind of take with them as they possibly think about when they go through a particular setback? So, Cole Powelson, what's your best worst thing?
The best worst thing that happened to me happened early in my career. It was I applied for a dream job at 16 years old at a shop that is now really world renowned, but at the time was a relatively early up and coming Subaru tuning shop called Cobb Tuning. And they had recently moved to Utah, and I loved Subarus. It was the brand at that age, because mainly rally cars, and I was just into that. And I saw them when I was snowboarding, so Subarus were my car. It was pretty easy to convince. And this shop came to town. It was attached with another shop called Modern Garage, and they were hiring a floor sweeper. And I thought, you know what, I'm totally qualified for this. And, in fact, I'm overqualified, so let's go down and get this job. So I put in my resume there, and I talked to a couple of people, and but I'd been in there before, obviously, and I didn't get the job, and it was the best worst thing ever. I was bummed, and I went back and I talked to the guy. I thought like I had missed my opportunity. That was the only dream job ever. And he gave me some really good advice. And I committed to going to school, like a trade school, immediately after high school. And in fact, it pushed me to graduate high school early, along with my mom saying, please leave. So those things combined had an effect on me getting out sooner. And so because I didn't get the job there, I went to school and I got into Porsche factory training, which blew my mind. That was the goal, but it's like, it is so rare. They only take a handful of students every year, and from across the country. So this was that was my big break. And for me personally, and then to say I'm a Porsche mechanic, to become a professional, I did that got accepted in 19, and at 21 years old, I was at the Porsche dealership. So that string of events, from like literally crying as a 16-year-old boy that just didn't get hired for his dream job, to fast forward years later, and I can remember opening the letter saying I was accepted to Porsche training, and that was 3 years later. But to me, it was a whole lifetime. Like the trajectory of my life was rocket ship, and it was from getting rejected from my dream job at the time. But I didn't realize, as a 16-year-old kid, what the world really had in store. I just knew that the one place I wanted to be, I didn't even qualify as a floor sweeper. So that was really what lit the fire to go off and push. And I couldn't believe the trajectory I had, just 3 years later. It was pretty amazing. And I still tell him thank you. His name's Trey. And he gave me some really good advice. And now that I look back, he spent almost an hour with me one-on-one in his office. And I think about how busy I am at my shop that wasn't on as big time as him. He spent a lot of personal time with me. It definitely helped me out and pushed me in the right direction. So even though it was the worst thing, it kind of ended up being the best.
Yeah, it sounds it. It's interesting. At age 16, you were willing to go back in and to have the conversation, because I don't know many adults who get denied or rejected for something really important to them are willing to do that. What made you be willing?
Well, my mom built that in me. I'm comfortable talking to anybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are, what status, like where you think you land. My mom didn't care. She didn't judge anybody. And so I was in the bar with her a lot, and I was shaking hands and having adult conversations as a young man. And I would talk to anybody, whether it was the produce guy or, one of the local drunks, whatever it may be. I was having conversations with these people. And so I wanted to know why I was rejected. And I felt like I was adult enough to go in there and have that conversation. It's like, just tell me what I need to do. Do I need to come out with my own broom line, or tell me what I need? And he just said, dude, it's like a floor sweep position. It's nothing personal. It's like, we just know this guy, and he's already got a Subaru and hanging out here. And I'm actually friends with the guy that got the job, and he's done really well for himself also. So yeah, it was a really good conversation to have and change my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also really cool that he sat down with you and was willing to give a 16-year-old feedback and just to kind of give you some advice. It's interesting, the thing that you really wanted, but that you didn't get right away, and the 3 years in between, and to become a Porsche mechanic, which is a very coveted position, for a 16-year-old from 16 to 19 feels like a lifetime. I know now at this age, I'm sure it feels like a blink of an eye, but it's what really stands out is how, when you want something bad enough, how it's not always overnight, but you're keeping your eye on the goal, keeping focused, landed you where you needed to be, which to me kind of is inspirational. I hope it's inspirational for folks who are dealing with rejection or a setback, knowing that if they keep at it, that a door will open. Maybe there's just another angle on it, another hole that you can bust through, and but the goal is just to keep going. And now you found you made your own path, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it worked out. Couldn't write this. You could never predict this. It was just timing and my personality and perseverance, if you want to call it that. But it really is one day at a time. It is such a long, difficult path. Like I looked back at that challenge, that worry, and that's so small potatoes. But it's like it ended up being a big deal, and so I have constant headaches because I'm also trying to fund this new company off LYFE Motorsport called Sierra Cars. And so I'm building a single seat car, manufacturing it from scratch. And, it is just kicking my butt, man. It's just, but it's totally self-inflicted. I go out and do this to myself. And I think I just got used to getting my butt kicked early and just dealing with it and move on to the next thing. Like, I make mistakes every day. I lose all the time. It's just, but I'm going to just come back and do it again the next day. So as long as I can look at it as one day at a time, I can keep fighting those fights. But it's a very brutal business to be in. A lot of the people that are in this business don't need to make money. It's a hobby for them. They're wealthy and they come in and play race cars, and they don't need a shop that makes money. Like, I do, I eat food and I live in a house. So I need these things need to last. And it's just one day at a time is all I get, how I get through the bad days, because I spend a lot more days in the office than behind the seat of a race car.
Yeah, that's the real reality of it. Well, I appreciate your perseverance and your willingness to stick through the bad days to get those good moments, and also the opportunities you're providing with the Sierra Cars, as well as just your team that you've put together. So, Cole, what's the best way people can find you, follow you? Where can they keep up with you?
I'm on YouTube under LYFE Motorsport, LYFE. And then I have Instagram and Facebook. It's Cole Powelson. I'm easy to find. Cole the Racer, I guess, is my Instagram handle.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with me this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Josh Walewa. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at Boomnote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cooled Jets Music. You can follow him at Cooled Jets Music on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to The Best Worst Thing.
This one's for the good times and this one's for the bad.